China proposes a way to end the war in Ukraine. Could it work? Would Kyiv and Moscow compromise? And can Beijing be seen as an honest broker while the West accuses it of supporting Russia? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Tom McRae. The People's Republic of China wants peace in Europe. It's a tough ask, but Beijing has sent its top diplomat on tour with a plan. Wang Yi met President Vladimir Putin in Moscow just 2 days before the first anniversary of the war. Beijing says its stance on Russia's invasion is neutral, but it's become a major trading partner with the country since Western powers imposed sanctions on Moscow. Washington is watching closely as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he plans to meet China's President Xi Jinping to discuss the proposal for peace. Katrina Yu reports from Beijing.
Beijing's no-limits partnership with Moscow has damaged its reputation largely in the West. But Chinese officials say they're working to mediate the conflict and promote peace. The United States and its allies aren't convinced, but analysts say other countries might be.
It understands that its reputation will be deeply damaged in the United States, in Canada, in a range of Western European countries, and in places like Japan and Australia. But the bulk of the developing world, for example, has a relatively ambivalent attitude towards Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
In Jakarta, Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang met his Indonesian counterpart, Retno Marsudi. The two discussed strengthening trade and maintaining regional stability.
New Cold War competitiveness of great powers should not appear in the Asia-Pacific region.
And in Tokyo, Chinese and Japanese security chiefs held talks for the first time in 4 years. Beijing is troubled by Japan's planned military buildup, while Tokyo fears a potential attack by China on Taiwan.
We are facing many challenges and issues, as well as various possibilities in our relationship.
The flurry of diplomatic activity comes after the U.S. shot down a suspected spy balloon in its airspace earlier this month. Washington accuses China of flying spy balloons over 40 countries, something Beijing denies.
China's charm offensive isn't confined to diplomatic meetings. It's also released 2 documents this week, one calling for a more collective approach to global security and another attacking U.S. dominance on the world stage. China wants to reshape the global order into one less influenced by democratic values, and it says it will stand by any country which shares its worldview, including Russia. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
Let's take a closer look at China's proposal to end the conflict. Beijing is calling for an end to Western sanctions on Russia and urging Moscow and Kyiv to hold peace talks. And it suggests creating humanitarian corridors for civilians, as well as steps to ensure grain can be safely exported from Ukraine. And in a reminder of what could be at stake in the conflict, the plan also warns against the use of nuclear weapons, as well as attacks on nuclear power plants. Beijing says it is neutral in the conflict, but Washington is voicing concerns China is planning to supply Moscow with weapons. Beijing denies those claims. Well, for more on this, I am joined by our guests. In Beijing is Huiyao Wang, the founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization. In Moscow is Tatiana Kukhareva, Russian journalist and former deputy head of Sputnik News. And in Odessa is Hanna, Shelest, the director of security programs at Ukrainian Prism, a foreign policy council think tank. A warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much for being on Inside Story. I will get to some of the more contentious issues in this plan proposed by China. But first, I do want to begin with China. Henry, if I can start with you, why does China want to be involved in all of this? What is in it for them, and why are they proposing this now?
Well, we just gone through the 1 year anniversary of this Ukraine-Russian conflict, and which is a very unfortunate and very sad. And also, China is the only country actually since that Ukraine is fighting Russian, and and also that is NATO behind Ukraine, and so basically, the whole West is fighting Russian, and China is the only country that is significant enough. The second largest economy is not involved in this conflict at all, and China has a very unique position to broker peace, and China has actually. You saw, you reported that Director Wang has just conducted a shuttle diplomacy, visited a number of European countries, spoke at the Munich Security Conference, which I also just came back from that. But also, I think he also met the Ukraine foreign minister and the Russian counterpart to really broker this peace and then find out what's going on. And then China has, at this time, around the anniversary, issued this position paper, which I think you just outlined quite well. And sovereignty, territorial integrity of Ukraine, of every country, should be respected. And also, I think most significant also, China doesn't really want to see any nuclear weapon being used and nuclear power plants being used or a biochemical weapon being used. And also, humanitarian aid, food security. So what can you get? That's a very strong position that China is proposing, and also to call for peace and talks. So I think China is really doing a lot of public goods for the world and trying to promote peace and stability, and also pursue to the UN principle approach. And China like to be more involved in this mediating and also see the end of this tragic crisis.
Okay, Tatiana, I want to go to you next and how this peace plan has been received in Moscow. I mean, it seems, I think a foreign ministry spokesperson said, we share Beijing's views. I mean, so in Russia's eyes, is China really the best place, a country to mediate any potential negotiation here?
Well, Tom, I think that in Russia's eyes, China would be a perfect party to mediate here, because first and foremost, it's a party that's proven to say the least, not hostile to Russia. And we obviously can't look for any of the Western parties to mediate in any sort of peace relationship, peace negotiations with Ukraine. It's a very simple fact that throughout this year, all of the discourse, every single address coming from the Western part of the world was filled with such hate towards the Russian leadership, towards the Russian people as well. So I don't believe that there would be a very limited number of countries that, in Russia's eyes at this stage, would be suited to mediate any sort of negotiation. However, I don't think that this is the bigger question at stake at the moment.
Yeah, we'll get to some of the bigger issues in just a moment. Hanna, I want to talk to you next. Zelensky has said that he plans to meet Xi Jinping. I mean, can Zelensky trust Xi and the Chinese to negotiate a fair deal, or would they even want them to?
First of all, we should say that China is 1 year late with their proposals, because since the beginning of the war, they had more pro-Russian position. If we remember that we were really lacking their statements for the grain deal for others, but at the same time, they were buying Russian energy resources or bypassing some of the sanctions. That's why now the official position, and not only official position in Ukraine, that it is not a peace plan. It is the Chinese position. And that is the big difference, as it said in my city. Because in general, when you have a mediation effort, you would like to ask the position of two sides. And what we saw, the travel of the Chinese official to Moscow, the negotiations regular with Moscow, and we didn't have real actual contact with the Ukrainian side. That's first of all. The second, it is definitely, one small remark about the statement of my Chinese colleague, because it's not West fighting Russia. Nobody been fighting Russia. It is Russia invaded independent and sovereign territory of Ukraine. So what is really missing in this plan, and why it is not perceived as the peace plan, it is withdrawal of the aggressor from the territory of Ukraine. Because for China, always the territorial integrity of the state was so important. And in this so-called proposals. We haven't seen these prerequisites for the possible peace.
Yeah, we'll get to some of those issues in just a moment. Henry, I want to put that to you, though. I mean, there's been plenty of criticism that China is hardly neutral in all this, that the fact that it hasn't condemned Russia's invasion clearly shows a bias right from the outset. What do you say to that?
Well, I think Chinese position are very clear from the very beginning. I think at the very beginning, when war broke out, President Xi already called President Putin, saying China doesn't want to see a conflict and would like to see the peaceful process. I think that at the beginning, there are some peace talks going on between Russia and Ukraine, and China has always encouraging that. And when Chinese leaders talk to European leaders, to President Biden, they all encourage this kind of peace talk. So I even wrote an op-ed in New York Times 1 month after the war broke out. I said China could mediate and try to help. So we see that is happening now. And because the war is really dragged on, China also provided humanitarian aid to Ukraine. China is really also had a very strong position of not using nuclear weapons. And also called for sovereignty and territorial integrity of every country, and also a balanced security to be ensured for the world. So I think China's position is very clear, very strong.
But at the moment, Henry, China's also, sorry to interrupt, Henry, China's also being accused by the US that it could potentially supply arms and ammunition to Russia. I mean, that's hardly a neutral position, is it? I know it's been denied by Beijing.
Well, that's not true. I mean, we heard that old story again. I mean, I remember last year when Chinese diplomat meeting U.S. diplomat before the Rome meeting in Rome, there was rumors like that spread by the U.S. again. So now they're doing the same. But the Chinese, I think the government official has already denied that, and also Chinese Defense Minister Wei Fenghe said at the Shangri-La dialogue that China does not provide any military or substantial material support there. Of course, the normal trade, China doesn't favor sanctions because that is really hurting the global economy. We are on top of a pandemic, and that is really, I think, China said again in this position paper. So we hope that we can really sit down and talk and let's have discussions. I mean, that's really, the peace process needs to start somewhere. And I think I proposed in my New York op-ed, I said, let's have a 7-party talk, P5 security member plus Ukraine plus EU, within the UN chaired by Secretary Guterres. Let's do that. Let's do a peace talk, 7-party talks.
OK, Hanna, I want to get to probably the most contentious point in this peace plan, and that is the first point that is raised in it is all about respecting sovereignty. The plan does not specifically say that Russia must withdraw its troops from Ukraine. I mean, is that simply the bottom line, that Russia has to return back over the border, remove all its troops, hand back any land that it may have won so far back to the Ukrainians?
Yes, if we speak about the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, that is the bottom line. It's not even the red line. That's something as the prerequisite, because here we have the open act of aggression recognized by all international organizations. And yesterday, United Nations General Assembly resolution just confirmed it yet one again, not speaking about the international courts. And here you need to understand that Ukraine is not fighting for 5 square kilometers of some disputed lands. We are fighting for our people that are living at those territories. So that's why for us it is so important. And we know what is happening there with the re-education, with the political prisoners, with all other stuff. That is just classified by many parliaments already as the genocide. But I would say that that is not the only problem in that peace plan, because there are a lot of pro-Russian positions there, or retranslation of the Russian positions. Some others are just the statements without the real proposal. So, when you speak about the peace plan, you want certain types of the implementation. For example, when China is speaking about the nuclear security, Ukraine was the first one to speak about nuclear security as one of those states that rejected nuclear arsenal. Even more, China is one of those who signed Budapest Memorandum in 1994 about this. But at the same time, we see just the call to the Russian Federation and not even the call to withdraw the military forces from the biggest European nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. So you see, these shadows are really important, and they demonstrate that to state a position was much more important than really find an interesting positions, what to propose to the negotiation table. Plus, negotiating the situation with European Union or with Washington, that's very interesting. But the war is happening at the territory of Ukraine. Ukrainian people are struggling and fighting. So probably Chinese side should negotiate with Ukrainian leadership, but not with Brussels, Berlin, or Washington, or somewhere else. They can negotiate with their neighbors about their problems. But if they talk about us, they need to talk with us.
OK. Tatiana, I see you shaking your head pretty much right the way through that response. I mean, what's your view about the sovereign territory? I mean, is Russia ever going to hand back any land that it has won since it invaded Ukraine?
Well, look, Tom, I'm shaking my head because I'm hearing the same rhetoric from my Ukrainian vis-a-vis that I've heard throughout this year. And unfortunately, this is the biggest issue that is standing in the way of any sort of negotiations between the two parties. For instance, there's no position in their mind. If a country does not side with Ukraine, it is automatically against it. So for Ukraine, neutrality as a concept means that you're siding with Ukraine, but not all the way through. And in real world, neutrality is exactly what China has portrayed so far. Its position has been more than balanced, actually. As you might have noticed, China's abstained from several votes in the UN. It's the definition of balance. And the plan itself, it's really actually good. But there's one problem, that for Ukraine and for its Western backers, and when you say, when Ukrainians say, no, Russia's not fighting the West, but of course Russia's fighting the West because Ukraine is fighting with the military power of the West. Without Western support, I dare say that war wouldn't be here now. This conflict would have been a very different one.
Indeed, but we're talking about hopefully trying to find an end to the war. And if you could just go back and answer the question that I first asked. I mean, will Putin, would he remove troops from any territory in Ukraine that they have won over the past year as part of a negotiation and return back to Russian territory as it was 1 year ago before the invasion?
Well, Tom, a lot has happened in this year. And if you've been keeping an eye on the news, and I suspect you have, then the territories that the Russian troops are currently in have been admitted into the Russian Federation following referendums. So,
but those referendums haven't been recognised by anyone.
By the West. By the West.
By
of course
Russia.
They haven't.
But they haven't been recognised by anyone else apart from Russia. So I'm taking from your response that there would be no negotiation on potentially removing troops as part of a negotiation. Is that correct? Henry, I just want to go to you on this point because it does seem like a pretty glaring admission in any peace plan, because it's always going to be a sticking point, isn't it? If Russia doesn't remove its troops from Ukrainian land, then there's no way forward in a negotiation.
Well, I think from the very beginning, we see Turkey, Israel, and some other mid-power trying to broker peace. But China, we really, don't want to see this war prolonged. And then China, at this anniversary, really proposed a peace plan. And also, I would say that that is also China, a top diplomat, has met Ukraine foreign minister face to face, in Munich. I was there in Munich conference to witness that. So I think that is really very significant. Also, China met his Russian counterpart. I mean, right now, we hear a lot of rhetoric, a lot of fight languages, in this battleground. But where are the peace brokers? I mean, we need a peace plan and peace proposal.
But this plan doesn't. It's
not a perfect plan.
Yeah, no, of course not.
Plan, but we have to start from somewhere.
But surely China would have known that this is going to be the most contentious issue. Russian troops in Ukrainian land. So surely that should have been one of the 12 points, yeah?
I'm sorry, Tom, but what do we consider Ukrainian lands? Because if you listen...
Tatiana,
Ukrainian territory is recognized by the United Nations, including the Russian Federation.
Hang on a sec, Hanna. Hang on a sec. I just want to go back to. We've got time to hear from everyone. I asked Henry the question, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think certainly there's a big gap between the two sides on the positions between Russia and Ukraine. Absolutely. But I would say, no matter how big the difference, at the end of the day, we really have to sit together. We need a peace conference or peace summit. I was proposing let's have a 7-party talk at the UN and P5 plus Ukraine plus EU, and let's talk. We have to talk and sit down, and we cannot just continue to fight. So while Ukraine and also backed by NATO and West to fight with Russia, who else? There's a significant country, second largest economy, that has a position. China proposing a position to call for peace. That itself, this gesture is very significant. It's recognized by Ukraine. It's recognized by Russia. So it's good.
Okay.
Both countries said it's a good thing. Yeah, it's good. Zelensky said it's a good thing. So let's do it.
Thanks, Henry. Tatiana, what were you going to say before?
I'm saying, Tom, that the problem here lies even deeper, that the territories that are, in fact, right now considered by Russia and will be from here on as part of the Russian territory. The problem lies in Crimea. If you listen to every speech, yesterday's conference of President Zelensky, he says, we're going to liberate Crimea. I myself grew up in Crimea. I'm sorry to say that, but Crimea never wanted to be Ukrainian. And to begin a conversation with the Ukrainian side and with its Western backers, we need to understand, and I'm afraid that that Russia needs comprehension that, Crimea is never going to be on the table.
Okay, Hanna, I want to get you...
We're not even talking about the territories that we're fighting over right now. The territories that have been subjected to the anti-terrorist operation were, at least what Kyiv called it, from starting in 2014. If I'm not mistaken, it was the end of the year. But the bigger question that Ukraine seems to be abundantly clear on, they're fighting for territory.
Okay, Hanna, I want to bring you in now. Is Crimea going to be on the table here and in a negotiation?
Ukraine is already on the table, and the question is not in the president's statement. If you remember the negotiations that happened between Russia and Ukraine back in March in Istanbul, at that time it was a proposal to speak about Crimea separately. However, the Russian Federation broke those negotiations, and after March we didn't have any. It's not that Ukraine didn't want negotiations in the beginning of the war. However, when we speak now, and Tatiana is so categorical, probably she just doesn't want to see how the resistance movement within the last few months after liberation of Kherson started to be strong. Just yesterday, Ukrainian flag was put by partisans, and we see thousands of the yellow ribbons, of the leaflets, of the posters all around Kerch, Sevastopol, Simferopol, and all other places around. So not speaking about 15% of the Crimean Tatar population, the indigenous population of this peninsula that didn't support the annexation and now heavily prosecuted, and their houses just being destroyed by the Russian authorities over there. So that's probably we need to leave this question alone as we are now discussing the Chinese position. And I would like to make one positive statement, even that I don't believe in the perspective of this initiative of China. One of the reasons because they never had the real experience of mediator, and their goals are a little bit different from what the classical mediator will do. But for Ukraine, the very fact that China finally decided to speak about this war, about the Russian aggression, because it's not that the West is backing Ukrainian fight, they are backing Ukrainian defense of the territory. I wish Tatiana to wake up with the air raids each morning, as I did this morning, because of her forces. But let's speak about China, because there are two very important issues that they put in their so-called peace plan and that will be important for the international area. First of all is nuclear security, because as one of the nuclear powers, China should have a bigger voice in this issue. And we have a lot of jeopardization of the situation. And the second is the food security. China always been one of the biggest buyers of Ukrainian agriculture products, and a lot of countries around China as well. So the decision of the question with the grain exports, with the agricultural exports, and if China would join these negotiations, that also will be more important. So it seems to me that these points of Chinese plan, we can divide in the individual, and China can try to find their niche in between all those issues, even if the whole proposal will never be discussed in full.
Okay. Henry, I want to go back to you now. I mean, what is on the line here for China? What is it hoping to get out of it? Obviously, it's got major ties with both Moscow and Kyiv. So, I mean, what is it really hoping? I mean, and how urgent is it that this war comes to an end for China's prosperity?
Well, absolutely. I think China is the largest trading nation with 130 countries. And also, China is also a large trading nation with Germany, with the European and American and ASEAN. So China doesn't want to see this world continue to drag on into a continuous fight and conflict. China would like to see the peace and the stability. And also, we are really also facing a lot of challenges and a nuclear possibility too, nuclear war and things like that. So I think China as a nuclear power has made that position. First of all, China will never first utilize nuclear power, but also China doesn't want to see others to use nuclear power too. So I think that is a very strong message there. So, but also again, China would like to see a more balanced, secure peace, and but also like to see this peace process started somewhere. Yeah. At least we need to start somewhere. We need to talk, and some country has to propose a peace plan, even though it's not perfect. But let's start from that somewhere. And then I think while Ukraine and West is in confrontation, but also Russian as well, they are having this conflict. China is the only third party is significant enough to broker a peace, and at least also support UN to be involved in that process. So I think that the UN Secretary General Guterres has visited Moscow and Kyiv and also wants to break a peace. So now China as one of the P5 countries to support that initiative, and also we hope other countries will join in. Then let's start talking and then have an immediately ceasefire, and after that, let's talk about negotiate, have a new Minsk moment. Let's do something. I mean, rather than we're having no hope of seeing this become another long haul of another Afghanistan or a long fight that benefit nobody and hurts the world prosperity and stability.
I imagine that there are many people that are agreeing with your comments that they'd like to see this war brought to an end as quickly and as peacefully as possible. Thank you so much to our three guests, Henry Huiyao Wang, Tatiana Kukhareva and Hanna Shelest. Thank you very much for being on Inside Story today. Well, and thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Tom McRae, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.